So if you've never read the book Blue Ocean Strategy, it takes two different sort of industries and combines it in something completely different. So a good example would be Cirque du Soleil. You've got the circus and you've got the theater. Well, what happens when we combine them? We lower the overhead of the animals. We have no competition.
Yep.
And so these are the types of things that I like to think about and then apply them to my business.
This is the real estate investing experience. We get it. Real estate can be rough sometimes, and that's why we bring in the experts to talk about the experiences you won't hear anywhere else with your hosts, John Cohen and Chris Grinzik.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Investing Experience. I'm your host, Chris Grinzik. With me, as always, John Cohen. How are we doing?
Got no complaints. We're rolling, getting ready for the holiday season. Just
Absolutely.
had a great Thanksgiving and closing the year out strong.
Yeah, we're busier than we usually are.
Correct.
Most holiday periods usually almost like a mini holiday. Nobody really comes in and gets much done, but we're keeping busy, so it's good.
Exactly.
But we got a really good guest on today. Interesting topic, in a niche we haven't spoken about on here, but I'm sure, some people or a lot of people are somewhat familiar with, but hopefully we can get some more insights into that. But without digging too much further into it, Mark, thanks for joining us.
Chris and John, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. So you want to tell everybody who you are, where you come from, a little bit about your background and what you're involved in?
Sure. I'm Mark Podolsky. I am the Land Geek. I've done over 5,200 land transactions since 2001. So I'm a full-time land investor, and I absolutely love it. I started as a very unhappy, miserable, micromanaged investment banker, and I had a 45-minute commute to work and back. It was high stress. It was long hours. I felt like I had no control, and it got so bad for me that, I wouldn't get the Sunday blues, anticipating having to be back at work on Monday. I'd get the Friday blues, anticipating having the weekend go by really fast and having to be back at work on Monday. Mm-hmm. So my firm hires this guy, and he's telling me that as a side hustle, he's buying up raw land, pennies on the dollar, and he's making a 300% return on his investment. And I'm looking at companies all day long.
Right.
And, a great company has 15% EBITDA margins or free cash flow. Average companies 10%, and I'm looking at companies all day long less than 10%. So of course I don't believe him. And I go to New Mexico. I've got $3,000 saved up for car repairs. I do exactly what he says to do. I buy up 10 half-acre parcels at an average price of $300 each. I put them up all online, and sure enough, they all sell for an average price of $1,200 each. It worked 300%. So I took all that money. I went to another auction in Arizona where I live. And again, this is 2000. There's no one there. And I'm buying up lots. I'm buying up acreage for like nothing. And over the next 6 months, I sold all that property and I made over $90,000. Excuse me. I'm losing my voice here. And, and so I go to my wife. I'm like, honey, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to become a full-time land investor. And she's pregnant. And she's like, absolutely not. Yeah, exactly. So I go, okay. No worries. So it took me 18 months for the land investing income to exceed the investment banking income. And then I quit. And I've been doing it full-time ever since.
That's
it's awesome. Anyone can, I think a lot of our audience and a lot of the feedback we've been getting, that's great to hear that I always tell people it's not a get rich quick. Real estate's not get rich quick, but 18 months, a good 18 months to get started is a fair number from my standpoint. Now, you were able to replace your income that quickly, which is fantastic and amazing. And it's a product class that I think most people don't even want to talk about because, raw vacant or raw land who does that sell to? Why would you buy that? There's so many questions that people probably overlook, and they go right to the end game or right to let me go buy a 400 unit apartment complex for cash flow. But there are ways to do what you're doing, and sort of, it's the exact same thing. Just it's a unique product that most people probably overlook.
No, I love it. It's, it's the least sexy, most boring niche out there. Like if you go to HGTV or the DIY network, you'll never see me on Flip This Land. The before picture, raw land. The after picture, raw land. Right. It's just me in front of my computer, geeking out. And but you're absolutely right. It's really not very sexy. And I think what you brought up was a really interesting point. Like, we can all wrap our heads around, everyone needs a place to live. Nobody wakes up and thinks to themselves, boy, I'd like some raw land today. But once you start doing this business, you realize 99% of the things that we have in our life, we don't need. So there's a lust for raw land in this country that, thankfully for me, is overlooked because we have this nice, small, non-competitive niche.
Yeah. Can you take a couple minutes for somebody that's just like, this, the same thought process you basically said you had of this sounds ridiculous, it can't happen. Break down, 30,000 foot view of what the process looks like. Like, how do you buy something for so cheap? It's the same product when you buy it and sell it, and, make such a good spread. Whether you're getting the same spread to not is, we'll find out, but, just the process of what that looks like.
Yeah. Let me walk you guys through the model. So Chris and John, where do you live?
New York.
Long Island.
New York. Okay. Long Island. All right. So let's assume that you guys own together 10 acres of raw land in Texas, and you owe about $200 in back taxes. Well, when I go to the county treasurer or the county assessor and I get this information and I see, oh, there's Chris and John, they owe $200 in back taxes on this raw land in Texas, you're advertising two things to me. Number one, you have no emotional attachment to that raw land. You live in New York, properties in Texas. And number two, you're distressed financially in some way, because when we don't pay for things and you're not paying your property taxes, we don't value them in the same way that we used to. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the comparable sales on that 10-acre parcel for the last, let's say, 12 to 18 months. I'm going to take the lowest comp, and all I'm going to do is divide by 4. And that's going to get me what Warren Buffett would call a 300% margin of safety. So let's say that in our example, the lowest comp is $10,000. I'm going to send you guys an actual offer of $2,500. Now, you accept it because you've been getting notices from the treasurer that if you don't pay your taxes, you're going to lose that property to a tax lien or a tax deed investor. So you accept it. In reality, 3 to 5% of people accept my quote unquote top dollar offer. So now, after you accepted it, we're going to go through due diligence. We got to confirm you guys still own the property. We got to confirm that there's been no breaks in the chain of title. There's no liens or encumbrances. We want to make sure there's ingress and egress or legal access. I want to know everything that a buyer is going to want to know about that property. And I outsource my due diligence now to my team in the Philippines. We pay about $11 for due diligence. And this is on deals 5,000 or less. Since your deal is 2,500, I'm going to do it myself. Now, if it's 5,000 or more, I'm going to go through a title company. But we're going to go through this whole checklist. Everything checks out. And then I'm going to buy that property from you for 2,500. You net 2,300, 200 goes to the county. Now I own it free and clear. Now I'm going to sell this property 30 days or less, and I'm going to make it cash flow, just like you would a multifamily building. So the way that I'm going to do this is a little unique. So I have a built-in best buyer for that 10 acres. Do you guys know who it is?
No, tell us.
The neighbors. The neighbors. So I'm going to send out letters to the neighbors saying, hey, here's your opportunity. Expand your holdings, protect your privacy, protect your views. And oftentimes the neighbors will buy it. Now, if they pass, I'll go to my buyers list. I'll go to a little website you might not have heard of called Craigslist, 10th most trafficked website in the US. Smaller one, Facebook, Marketplace, buy sell groups. And then I'll go to the lands, landmodo.com, landsofamerica.com, landandfarm.com, landhub.com, landflip.com. There's a million of them. These are platforms of people that just buy and sell raw land. Now, the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to make it irresistible. So I'm going to ask my buyer to put down a $2,500 down payment. So I'm going to get my money out on the down or within 6 months. I'll keep my money out 6 months. You get my money out. Now I'm making a car payment. Let's say $449 a month, 9% interest for the next 84 months. So it's a one-time sale. I get a passive income of $449 a month at 9% for the next 84 months. No renters, no rehabs, no renovations, no rodents. Now, because I'm not dealing with a tenant, I'm exempt from Dodd-Frank, RESPA, or the SAFE Act. And because these are such small acquisitions, the game that we can play is a volume game. How many of these land notes do I need to create before my passive income exceeds my fixed expenses? And then I'm working because I want to, not because I have to.
That's basically the blueprint, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's your transaction, and it seems easy enough. I think it was I mean, that was as layman's terms as it gets, right? That's sort of the
pretty good picture painted.
That's the 30-second, whatever, high level top down view. That's a transaction in a nutshell. How you can go from, X to or A to Z.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously there's speed bumps along the way, but that basically paints the picture that anyone needs to see.
Sure. I have a question for you because I know people will do that where they, seller finance basically the land to the purchaser, but you started out flipping the land to other people. At what point did you decide to switch strategies from that, flipping, collecting the cash to, going to seller financing and collecting the check? Or do you continue to do a combination of both?
Yeah. So when I first started, I didn't have a mentor. Mm-hmm. And, 2001, a monkey could have made money in real estate, and I was that dumb monkey. So as I started making more and more money on these flips, and my network kind of grew, I started, talking to some other people in other industries, and I met this guy, Uri, who ended up selling his company for $360 million. And he had a billionaires as his mentor. So I was walking Uri through my business, and I was all proud of it. I'm like, look how this cash flows, and look at my margins. And he looked at me, he's like, Mark, you don't have a business. You have a job. It's a better job than you had, but don't fool yourself telling me that this is a business. And I'm like, I was kind of mad. I'm like, what are you talking about? And so he kind of walked me through everything. He said, look, what happens if you die? I'm like, oh, good point. Right? So there's nothing there. I'm doing everything, and my wife and my family just have cash. So that's when it kind of occurred to me, like, well, how can I make this thing a business? And to me, real wealth isn't money. It's the only finite resource we have, which is time. And so now, today, everything I do is based on creating more time for myself. So 90% of the business is now delegated and automated between software and inexpensive virtual assistants. So that's the first piece. And the second piece is I only want to do terms because I can make this asset continue to cash flow, for as long as that note goes. And that way I'm not constantly having to hustle and flip. It's a one-time sale. I get that passive income. Mm-hmm. And that's really the idea. Now, the point being that at some point we're going to run out of money, and that's where we use the other form of leverage. So we have three forms of leverage in this business. The first one is labor, inexpensive virtual assistants. The second one is automation or software. And the third one is other people's capital. And certainly when you're making these types of margins, I don't recommend having an equity partner. I recommend inexpensive debt.
Interesting. So when you're saying go out and use debt, how are you, utilizing debt? Is it to go out on the purchases and then you're repaying it upon, that seller financing sale where you pull all your money back? Is it, to help finance those when you can't, cover the full initial outlay of money, and their down payment? How are you utilizing that debt?
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily deal specific. I want to be able to close on whatever I want to close on and have access to, either a line, or let's say I've got a buddy who's earning 0% in the bank. I'll pay him 10 to 12%.
Mm-hmm.
He's super happy with it. So that's really just how I'm utilizing it.
Okay.
Let me ask.
It's just the only reason you're going to do this is to scale. It's just to grow.
Course.
Yeah.
So the question, like when you finance a piece of property, right, the risk becomes, under the example you gave, significantly low because you pay $2,500 for it. Someone puts $2,500 down, and then you finance them for 84 months, whatever it is. How do you get over, or how do you manage the reoccurring monthly payments? And if someone goes default, do you even bother going after them, or what does that structure look like? And how is that maintained? Because that's something that, over 5,200 transactions or 52,000 transactions, whatever it was, if you have 20 pieces of property, 30 pieces, 40, 50, and you're financing them, you got paid back. So there must be either I'm not even going to care about it, or, walk us through that.
Right. So the way that we manage it is we use a software called geekpay.io. And geekpay.io is a set it and forget it automated system. So we get our down payment, we use a link in GeekPay, and then we get their information. So we get their ACH information or their checking account, the routing number, an account number for recurring payments via check. Now, if their check bounces or fails, we do have as a backup a credit card on file, which it will hit. So we went from an 8% default rate to 4% just using the software, and it eliminated 2 time-consuming, really annoying things for me. Number one, the borrower would call and say, "Hey, what's my current balance?" Well, they can log in and see it. And number 2, it'd be annoying if they say, "Hey, how to make a prepayment this month?" They could log in and make a prepayment. GeekPay will do all the amortization, and it will also automate the notifications. It notifies them if they're late. It notifies them if they made a payment, notifies me if they made a payment. So we have all of this in one piece of software. The other thing that we do is we mitigate our risk with our contract. We use a land contract as opposed to a deed of trust. So if you guys own your home, you know that you have a deed of trust. But a land contract, that asset will remain with us until that borrower pays off their promissory note. So there's no cost or foreclosure. We keep the down payment. We keep the monthly payments. They have 35 days to cure their default. On that 35th day, they don't. We go ahead, resell it. We get a new down payment and a new monthly payment.
Yep. So it would be similar to like a deed in lieu of foreclosure on a house or something like that. But like that's like you go default, I take the property back. Now this doesn't ever change. It doesn't change. Basically, the like layman's terms for instead of a deed of trust where it goes in your name and now you're the financer, it stays in basically like a 99-year lease or something very similar to that, where it doesn't exchange hands until it's paid off.
Right. Exactly.
So because the first thing I thought of is, what if someone bought this land to build a house on? How does that work?
Well, then they're going to have to pay off their note because you can't get a builder's permit unless it's in their name.
Gotcha.
True. So they would pay.
That's a good point. I didn't think about that.
So,
right.
And I'm sure that a lot of people, for the example earlier, if you're I don't want anyone to build next to me, I'll buy it or I'll finance it. It's the guy that's going to build a house on it. That's probably a totally different buyer and also a totally different process. You're probably not financing much of those. They're probably buying them outright and wanting to build or whatever it looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
And I'm sure it's so every transaction is going to be a little bit different, but for the most part, every buyer, you probably sell a lot of deals to the same people or the same type of people. It's probably, hit or miss on who, what, if it's 10 acres, 20 acres, half an acre, whatever it looks like, that probably dictates a lot of which bucket you go down.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'd say 90% of my investors are what I call legacy investors. Mm-hmm. They just like having this asset. They like that it's building their net worth. It really looks nice on their balance sheet. They may go out there one day. They may not.
Yep.
I got one guy. He's a CEO in San Diego, and every month, $5,000 a month note. He just wants to buy a portfolio of land, pays it off in a year, buys another portfolio. I'm like, Don, what are you doing with all this land? He's like, I just think it's cool.
That's
interesting. So talk to me a little bit about the acquisition or buying process. It sounds like you go out of state or out of your area. You're not just local. How do you pick and choose where you're going to start going down the rabbit hole to even find these properties? Because, when we look for things, we have, multifamily and tenants. We're looking for where people are going to, where rents are going up, et cetera, et cetera. What are some things that you look for when you're choosing an area?
Right. I mean, let's just be honest. Nobody wakes up and thinks themselves, boy, I'd like to have some raw land in Iowa, unless you live in Iowa. Right. So we really focus on the sunshine states, those fast growing states, mm-hmm. Florida, Arizona, Nevada, Colorado, Texas, California, a little bit in Washington, and a little bit in Oregon. So the rest of the country, we pretty much ignore unless it's going to be something opportunistic. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we're going to start. Then we're going to go about 2 to 3 hours outside of a major city. And then we're going to go to a little website, like those websites that I talked about, landmodo.com, landandfarm.com, and just confirm that people are doing deals in those counties. Yep. So I want to know definitively that deals can be done there.
Mm-hmm. When you're looking at deals that are done, is there a certain amount you want to see? Is there a certain amount, length of time that you want to see that a deal is transacted within? What about that?
No, not necessarily. I just want to make sure that there's other people. There's just transactions happening.
Gotcha.
The metric doesn't need to be, that, specific. Small.
Yeah.
Specific. Yeah.
So little backstory in this, because I've researched this about, what was it now, 12 months ago almost?
Yeah, I had to give it to
And I thought it was really interesting because I always had a problem. So my background was I started by flipping and failed. And large reason was, one, really small margins in our area. And two, I had no, builder's background or construction background. So it was kind of, walking upstream and trying to figure it out. I thought this was really interesting because it's essentially just a numbers game and just saying, can I find a piece of land that's worth X? And like you said, buy it for 20 cents on the dollar and sell it for 70, 80, 90, 100 cents on the dollar and, make my profit that way. I thought it was really interesting because you're removing a lot of the complicated components out of it. However, I also thought when I started researching it that the barriers to entry are so low because of that. I could see a massive flood of people coming into this area over the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years. How have you seen this market change from the investor side?
Yeah, my company, Frontier Properties, has grown every year. Mm-hmm. So all ships rise with the tide. It's interesting because this market, this niche is so funny, like we talked about in the beginning of the podcast. And you don't have private equity groups. Mm-hmm. You don't have hedge funds. It's just these sort of small cottage industry players. So you look at the size of the market and the fact that it's not local. You could have 1 million people in this niche. You, me, 1 million people. We're all going to run out of money before we run out of deal flow because there's billions of acres for sale. Mm-hmm. And literally, relatively speaking, no one doing it. Again, You're not going to go on HGTV or the DIY network and see flip this land. It's just very unsexy. And the fact that it's not physical, it's one of those things that just out of everybody's consciousness. So the people that tend to sort of gravitate to it are engineering people, typically. Like they just like to shuffle money or shuffle paper and make money. And they like the systems processes of it. But real estate people, they don't love it because they want to do those bigger deals. They want to go to the big conference and brag about how many units they own and how many doors and what syndication they're forming. I mean, this is a big ego play in real estate and in land. In my niche, you kind of get laughed out. You bought a piece of land for $5,000. Like that doesn't even go on their radar.
Right.
So it's funny you bring that up because when Chris brought this to our attention, he basically said, "Hey, look at," and we own a piece of property next to we built a ground up student deal, and so we started getting these letters in the mail. We'll buy this land for $2,000, $1,800, and we paid $250,000 for it. So we're getting these letters, and then it ran parallel with this is a really interesting thing, and I looked at it from the exact point of view that you did. It was you go to these conferences and you're right, there is an ego play to it. It's like, I have 5,500 units, I have 10,000 units, I have 80,000 units, and I was like, wait a second, that's great. But on the land side, it was intriguing to me because it's like, all right, if I have $50,000 or $100,000, if I can go buy 10 pieces of property, sell them or finance them, and I can do it on the side or by myself or not with 30 different partners like a syndication, it's, wow, if I can make a couple bucks, it's really intriguing. So I'll quote one of our investors the other day, shoot, ready, aim, or whatever, whatever that was. I sent out like 3,500 mailers to vacant land in the last 3 months. We're negotiating right now with a guy up in Vermont. It's 10 acres for like $10,000 when the property just south is the exact same size and it sold for like $150,000. And it sold last month. And if you go by like the per acre, just by doing very little research, and I'm let's figure it out. Let's throw a couple dollars toward it and see what happens. But it's exactly that picture. It's if this is not, I'm driving a Lamborghini with a $500,000 watch on my arm. You may have that, but this is not the sexy story. I own 50,000 apartments. This is, I make a couple bucks from financing it and I flip a couple properties here and there, but it's something that I could see why the engineers gravitate towards, because sort of I could sit behind my computer and there's not much interaction if I have it automated. If you have your virtual assistants doing X and your automated, your processing payments and stuff like that, it's probably, there's not many human interaction except for maybe talking to someone if the price is a little off, or it's just, hey, you're either going to sign it or you're not.
Right, which our intake manager handles that part of it and then passes that off to our acquisition manager. But, John, what you just said is a really good example of a really nice deal in our niche.
Yeah.
And it happens every day.
Yeah.
For sure. So the question is, why are you getting that deal?
Well, so the reason why he called us, we sent a mailer, and so my brother is, we're extremely busy. So I sort of put him in charge, and he just sold his butcher shop. So he's sort of just sitting there doing nothing. And he's not the interaction. Great people person, but he hates sales. So he's like, all you're saying is I just have to take a call with a yes or a no and then pass it off to the next down the chain. So he's been doing a very good job on it. And the guy called, he's like, how do you find our property? There's no address. You have an APN on it and nobody uses that. And that's sort of what the guy said. And, I think our offer was like $4,000. And he's like, my wife wants 10. And I was just like, 10,000. I mean, we have 10,000 to lose. It's like, all right, well, if it's worthless, it's worthless. We'll give it back to the county if we don't pay our taxes, or someone will direct mail us. But he said, how'd you find this? We've never gotten a mailer before. And I was like, well, this is what we did. But it was the exact thing. And we sent out, the response rate is overwhelming and most of these people are just, they're I don't want to say clueless is the wrong word. They're like you said, it's, they have back taxes, or they've owned it for 80 years, or they inherited it when their mother died and it's across the country. There's so many reasons to get rid of it, and you're giving them what they want. it's okay. Yeah. You know what? I'm making your life easier. I'm going to transact. I'm going to do all the closings. I'm going to pay for everything. You're going to get your check and be happy with it. And that's sort of the situation. Now, I go back and forth because 10 grand's not $300 for a piece of property, but all the comps point to a very nice little profit. So I sit there and I'm like, all right, let's give it a shot. Let's see if it works. And if it can be not, I don't want to say scaled, but if it can be something done on the side to make a couple dollars, and then you get into that financing model. It was really intriguing, but those deals, they're out there. And I've just by sending a couple mailers, we've seen an influx of stuff. Chris brought it up. That's why we're really excited to have you on the podcast, because you're doing it. You've been doing it for a long time. So it's something that, we definitely wanted to get out there to the people. Because even if people hear it, it's still not something that's sexy. So people still won't do anything about it because it's not flip this land or an ego thing.
Yeah.
No, exactly. It's a very simple model, but just like anything, this is not easy. I mean, this is a get rich slow process, just like anything in real estate. But, the big difference, I think, is that if, you're risking, let's say, $10,000, that's very different than risking, say, 30 people's $50,000.
Correct.
Where one deal won't knock you out of the game, where in some of these other niches, one deal
it's over
could get you out for like 10 years.
Oh yeah, no, it's over. I mean, if even if it's non-recourse debt, God forbid a deal went underwater, you're never going to get another loan. You have a ton of people's money at risk, and that's how I looked at it. So, a little bit different. I had a wife that was pregnant. My daughter's 9 months old. So I said, okay, God forbid something happens. This is all I have. If this is something that I can get up and running and it runs itself, and you do 1 or 2 deals a month and it's a couple $1,000s, at least it's set up on autopilot that it can run on its own, where the syndication is our bread and butter. We're not trying to deviate from that, but it was something that was intriguing to say, okay, Toro Real Estate Partners is the bucket. What other avenues can we bring to the table for our investors? And it's like you said, here, this is a 10, 12% fix, no problems. This is your syndication. This is whatever it is. And that's how I looked at it. And now it's just, does it work? Does it not? And we're still in proof of concept, but it's intriguing and it's good to hear. I've seen there's a handful of people. If you Google it, you can't really find much on it, but it's good to speak to someone that's actually been doing it and doing it for a while. It's not, you've been doing it for 3 months. You have a good 20-year track record. So it's like, guys, this is what I do and I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny. I spoke at the Joe Fairless Best Ever conference last year, and I kind of made the point, like, if you want to go into these bigger, syndications, this is a nice gateway drug to start. And, start doing these smaller deals, building up your cash flow and then, go into it.
Yeah.
I think a nice, entry into mobile home parks is sort of the next step from this.
Absolutely. I think you guys both touched on it. You kind of started getting into it sounds easy, but it's really not that easy. Can you talk a little bit more towards, because we've given a great picture of how great this can be, a little bit, some of the challenges you see, on every deal, or challenges you've experienced over the last 20 years that occur more frequently that people need to be aware of and things like that?
Well, I mean, I think the biggest challenge, I think, is making this a passive income machine. Right. So there's a lot of moving parts, and, hiring, training, managing inexpensive virtual assistants is a challenge. The acquisition piece of, really knowing your comps can be a challenge. Due diligence, even though we outsource it now, you still need to know enough to do it. And if you're going to hire a team to help you do that, well, you have to know it yourself first. So those are challenging. I think when there's 3,007 U.S. counties, even just starting county research can be a challenge.
Yeah.
Then, getting the list can be a challenge. Pricing the list can be a challenge. And, every step of the way, it's, little roadblocks here and there. which I don't mind because it keeps the niche nice and non-competitive.
Well, I think that, so like my real estate background started buying tax deeds and tax liens.
Yeah.
So that's how I got so excited about it. Because I was in finance, I was a financial advisor, made a couple dollars, and I said, oh, you know what? I could buy these things for $300, $400, $1,000. No harm, no foul. It's my own money. Whatever happens, happens. So I remember when I started reading about them, and I downloaded a book, in 2000. This is 2008, give or take. So I downloaded a book, and within the first 3 pages, there's a map, and there's 3,000 counties. So when you first start, in the land specific, multifamily, Google top 10 places to live, right? Oh, I'm going to buy a property in Salt Lake City. Okay, so is everybody else. When you go to 3,000 counties, some are over the counter, some are online, and you start doing all this, it's so overwhelming out of the box that, I bet 99.9% of people just throw it out and say, I can't do this, because that isn't, forget getting the list, forget picking that part alone is so overwhelming. Because, what makes, Eddy, New Mexico different than Orange County, New York, or, wherever in Texas. So you would be so overwhelmed that challenge alone, forget the training and the analyzing and the underwriting and the due diligence. It's just starting out of the box, short of throwing a dart against the wall and picking a county and saying, that's where I'm going to go. Give someone 3,000 anything and say, okay, find one that you like or 10 that you like. That's a very challenging thing. So when you started, I know you said that you went to New Mexico and you bought 10 properties. What was the, why there, out of the box? Because I think that's, a great thing for anyone listening. Say, hey, I'm going to give it a shot. What, I know you said you target, those growing areas, and now you're a little bit different than what you did. But when you picked up that first, interest in it, why did you say, I'm going there?
Well, I didn't know anything, really. I don't know. My buddy said, there's a tax deed sale here, and these properties are really cheap, and they're in New Mexico. And we drove around like, oh, look, there's mountains, rocks. Okay. So we're taking pictures, and then we're going to the county, we're getting plat maps, and this is, I don't even know if I could even get aerial maps at that time. So it was just, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? Like I thought, like my wife was like, what are you doing? Because this is like $3,000 I had saved up for car repairs. I'm like, honey, what's the worst thing that can happen? We own land. I'm not going to fill up the garage with a bunch of crap. So I'm like, maybe I'll barter it with our dentist, or I'll get free haircuts. like I'll be able to move it some way. Yep. And so that's kind of how it started. But I think the fact that I lived in the Southwest and I was close to New Mexico, that was a advantage, which at the time I didn't realize. And then the second deal in Arizona, again, inexpensive Southwest land. And I haven't deviated really ever since. I'm like an inch wide and a mile deep. So it's kind of all I think about is, what's a better way to buy and sell raw land?
So that right there, reading in between the lines, what I think most listeners have to do is, I did the same thing. I met a kid at a rooftop party in Manhattan. He had a stack of paper about this thick, maybe about an inch and a half thick, of all property he bought for like $1,000, $200. I was like, we're going to Philadelphia and we're going to go buy some land, like tax deeds. So I think that in itself is like, don't overcomplicate it. If you want to get involved, as you said earlier, if we do it, you do it, and a million other people do it, the market's not nearly saturated. So if anyone wants to start, throw a dart at a map, and just do it, right? Now you have to figure out how to find the list and stuff like that. And that's, we'll leave that to any follow-ups that anyone has. But, I tell people, jump off head first. Worst case scenario, if you spend $300 or $3,000, that's it. That's what you're going to lose. It's over. Okay, so you gave it a shot. But not starting, you're going to kick yourself in the ass more than going to New Mexico, going to Philadelphia, or wherever it may be. So there's no science. Now, there is a science to it as you get better at it, for sure. But starting, I think you can agree. And if I'm wrong, tell me. But there's no science in starting. Just start somewhere and figure it out after that.
Yeah, I mean, just be careful. Don't go to a Superfund site. Yeah. So, like, don't buy in New Jersey.
Yeah.
So, but you can go to EPA.gov and do that in your due diligence as well.
Yeah, that's the only thing you want to avoid is some major environmental problem, because then that's no good.
So since you touched on it, how do you, because you mentioned due diligence a little bit, how do you, do you go see every property? How do you make sure there's no problems with the land that you're buying? Things like that.
I can't tell you the last time I looked at a piece of property, honestly. So we outsource it. We'll go to, Craigslist and do like a local Craigslist gig and send them our property report along with the GPS coordinates and explicit instructions like, what are the neighbors doing? Are they dumping any properties? What's the road look like? Are there any dilapidated buildings? How far from the nearest McDonald's or Walmart? How far from the nearest services? What's compelling about this property? Are there lakes? Are there streams, mountains? And so we do that, and it's like $50 in an area that I don't know. So we'll outsource all of that, have them shoot, video, and then we'll use a app called What 3 Words. So we have them download that app. I have it on mine, and that way I know they're close. So I'm like, hey, where are you? What 3 words? And we can kind of verify they're close to the property from there. But like I did a deal in Texas. I bought a subdivision. It was a subdivision that went under with the POA. I mean, I'm telling you, like I call it my Breaking Bad subdivision. It was really, really bad. There was a bad element there. And I did my due diligence and I did the numbers. I'm like, well, with this margin of safety, one day this will get cleaned up. And I have a 90-day due diligence guarantee. I have a 365-day exchange guarantee. If someone goes out there, doesn't like it, I'll exchange a refund. We sold out of that subdivision. I mean, it's crazy. There's literally a pig for every barn. Now, maybe I was selling those properties to bikers. I don't know, but I've never been stuck with a piece of raw land.
Never.
Never.
What's the longest it's taking you to move a property?
Good question. I want to say the longest it's taken us to move, we bought maybe 330 acres in Nevada. And I remember that thing sat in 2010. It was a really tough time in the market for like 8 months.
I'm sure.
And then it sold. I'd say I really got hit in 2010. Mm-hmm. So 50% of my portfolio went just like done. So I had to resell all those properties. It took till about 2013 to really recover from that. So we're like on the long tail of real estate. Mm-hmm. You'll see like commercial and residential gets hit first, and then it's like da da da, and then land.
So just because you touched on it a little bit, I was thinking about bringing it up. Go through kind of that period of time, that 2 to 5 year period through the 2008 financial crisis, of owning, what kind of impact it was on you, how you got through it, and did you lose a ton of money? Did you do okay? What was the impact of it?
So I wrote a book about this called Dirt Rich.
There you go.
I tell my story, but I will tell you that Frontier Properties was profitable in 2008, 2009, 2010. Mark Podolsky was an idiot, and I had Parkinson's law of money. So the more money I made, the more money I spent. And as a result, because I wasn't using, today I use a profit first system, so it's much more automated as far as the money management. But so at that point in time, I just thought, this is never going to end. And I lost 50% of my income. And that was tough. Mm-hmm. It was just very, very tough. Because of our margins, the company was still very profitable, but I had to figure my stuff out personally. Mm-hmm. And then basically refigure out the marketing piece of this, because properties that might sell for $500 down, $500 a month, I had to figure out what's our new reality to sell these properties. And so was it 400 down? Was it 300 down? So there was a lot of testing involved in doing that. So it was no fun. And I don't recommend anyone go through that crisis. But I'll tell you that I learned a lot from it. And looking back on it, it's the best thing that ever happened to me. And, you know, you didn't know me, but you wouldn't have liked me because I lacked a lot of humility at that time.
But I think
and undeservedly so, by the way.
Yeah, and I think that any good real estate investor experienced that at some point in time where they get kicked in the teeth a little bit. And I would say the good ones persevere and get through it. Mm-hmm. And, you know, whether, you know, good person, bad person, whatever it looks like. But, you know, I think that they're, you know, if anyone says everything's gone 100% according to plan, they haven't done a deal or they haven't done enough deals because, you know, getting that kick in the teeth is, you know, you'll reinvent yourself. And that probably you can look at deals a little bit better or different now to say whether it's using the profit first system that you put in place now or whether it's, you know, hey, you know, we're not going to be greedy on this one. I think you can see things a little bit different as opposed to holding out for every last penny or for 100% when it's, you know, that the grass isn't always greener on the other end. And when, you know, during crisis is when you're either going to, the cream will go to the top or you're going to be out of business. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I'd say I got very lucky as well because I didn't over leverage. And, you know, I'm from the Midwest originally, so I'm just kind of naturally conservative. Mm-hmm. But a lot of my buddies who had bigger houses than me and bigger cars were over leveraged and they didn't recover and they had to go out and get, you know, jobs. Now, I have a bigger thinking question. Like your business with all the financing and the income and I'm sure that's pretty attractive to a large group of, like, if you wanted to take your prop business because of the cash flow and the income and the low risk, you probably have if you ever wanted to get there, I could turn around and go get a better line of credit, or I can sell this. It's probably a real business plan as opposed to just, you know, a guy sitting in his house flipping land or financing land. I mean, there's a real end game if you ever wanted to take it there, right? No, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of you know, goodwill that's been built, you know, brand awareness, and then of course just the note portfolio. But I do have a Dropbox folder in case I die, and there's no reason my wife or my estate couldn't continue running the business the way it's set up. I mean, we have all the infrastructure in place. The team is phenomenal, and everybody, it's really built on a system so that if the acquisition manager goes, the intake manager goes, it's all spelled out, it's all mapped out, and you know, the person managing for my wife could easily hire somebody else. Now, that's trial by fire? That was all set up? Like there wasn't like, you know, because you started with no mentor, got a mentor. What helped you distinguish how to do that better? Because you know, that's not something that, you know, now there's turnkey products that people can, okay, hey, I'm going to do it. But what, you know, can you speak to how that, you know, how you sort of navigated those waters and put those systems in place? Yeah. I mean, I just got a lot better at treating it like a business. You know, mentorship helped, and then educating myself, going to seminars, and just, you know, sort of doing a blue ocean strategy with my real estate business. So if you've never read the book Blue Ocean Strategy, it takes two different sort of industries and combines it in something completely different. So a good example would be Cirque du Soleil. You've got the circus and you've got the theater. Well, what happens when we combine them? We lower the overhead of the animals. We have no competition. Yep. And so these are the types of things that I like to think about. And then apply them to my business. But as far as systems and automation, again, like we talked about earlier, I mean, I'm obsessed with time because it's like, I can't get any more of it. I mean, it's to the point now, like I won't even look for a parking space if there's valet parking. So, you know, like our life is so short, anything that's going to save me time, any software that's going to save me time, I'm going to invest in, as opposed to taking the 2 minutes and me continually doing it. Well, if I can get rid of that 2 minutes for the rest of my life,
to do something that's more impactful, that's what I want to do. Not to take the joy out of everything. Like if you love what you're doing, you know, and it can be easily outsourced. I'm not saying outsource what you love, but just know that
you only have a limited amount of it, right? Time's the only you can't create more of it. There's a finite amount of it that's available. So, you know, anything you can do. I mean, even, you know, from going to the supermarket now and ordering from Amazon or you know, I was talking about it before. I wasn't a big Amazon person, right? I like to buck the trend. If everyone's doing one thing, I'll just do something out of spite. Yeah. That's just me as an individual. But I went to Dick's to buy shoes earlier this year. And I grabbed a pair of shoes, said, "You have this in size 12." The guy took his phone out, scanned it, said, "They'll be right out." I sat there like an idiot for 20 minutes, and the kid kept walking past me. And I said, "Yo, where are my shoes?" He said, "Oh, they're coming right out." So I said, "Yo, fuck this." I got in my car. I drove home. I ordered 6 pairs of shoes online. They all came. I put them on, and I returned 5 of them. I'm like, I didn't have to do anything. It was just, I was like, why would anyone go to a store? That took 2 hours out of my day to deal with some idiot that did not give a shit about anything because he's getting paid by the hour, doesn't care. But like little things like that, I'm now getting on the page of why am I going to spend a second of my time doing it if it can get done for me for the exact same quality?
I'm sure too, when you started outsourcing things, everybody has a part of their business or their job that they don't enjoy doing, but it's something that has to get done. I'm sure as you started outsourcing more and more, you could focus more on the things that you did enjoy and you did have passion for, and made it even more enjoyable as it got more outsourced, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like we work with our clients to create a love-hate list. What part of the business do you love? What part do you hate? Whatever you hate, let's get rid of it. And in our business, what people really hate to do is scrub a list. So we go to Fiverr.com. We already have all the VAs that know how to do this. There's Excel ninjas out there. $5. You wake up in the morning, you got a nice, clean list. I used to hate having to do the mailers, and then I hired this woman in South Carolina. She would handwrite all the mail. I'm like, well, why can't I automate this with software? So now we have a software program. We just upload the list, and using a API with lob.com, the mailers go out. But when they came back, nothing was worse than hearing the same story from the same seller over and over again, when they bought the property, how long they held the property, you know, asking questions about it. I didn't want to hear those stories. I'm like, I got to find an intake manager just to qualify them. Because some people would call and just tell me about the story of their property. Other people want to yell at me about the offer. I didn't know which. So then, you know, I'm like, I hate this. And then, so just piece by piece. And then I started getting paranoid. Well, what happens if the intake manager quits? And that's when you start creating these systems and, you know, training so that you're bulletproof.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Do you have any clients you work with that end up just pushing everything to the hate side and realize they don't actually want to work? They just want to make money for nothing?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think, I mean, you know, I call those people ambitiously lazy. Yeah. So, I mean, and really that's sort of the goal of all of this, is to have that choice. You build this passive income machine. So you go through all this temporary pain, and then one day, permanently for the rest of your life, you get to choose when you want to work, where you want to work, with whom you want to work, because you went through all that. And then you decide, okay, well, I'm going to move up Maslow's hierarchy of needs to self-actualization. Like, what do I really want to do with my life? Right. And like, for me, vehicle is done for me is it allows me to spend time with the people that mean the most to me, so I can really be present with those relationships. And that's really my sort of Trojan horse of running a land business, is secretly I want to spend more time and be more present with those people that I love, because at a certain point, you know, more money doesn't really help you. It's kind of the law of diminishing returns. I mean, we all like it, but I'd rather have that time.
But working backwards off that end goal, like you said, being present with the relationships that you wanted to be with, that's probably what fuels the other side to get the system automated properly. Because with that goal in mind, you can achieve the success you need today because you know what your end goal is. And I think that's where people fail in real estate is that, if your motivation is money, I don't think it's going to work. I think there has to be something else on the other end of that that's going to make you or force you to push forward, figuring out a system for an intake manager, figuring out a system so you can then step back.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does start with a lot of pain, don't you? Like my best clients, like Roberto Chavez, he's an attorney, and he got to $15,000 a month in passive in about 14 months, and he just went down to 3 days a week. He's spending a day doing what he wants to do, and then another day helping his dad, who's like in his 70s, on his ranch. And it's amazing to talk to him because he's so grateful for those 2 extra days that money and that passive income provides him that he wouldn't have had if he didn't go through all of this.
Yeah. No, I think it's hugely important. How long did it actually, I'm sure you're not done creating systems and building, but you've obviously plateaued to a certain extent. How long has it taken you to build what you've built to today?
Yeah, that's my second book, is Scaling Your Land Business. So
just come to me. I'll come up with book ideas for you.
I know. So look, I'll admit it. I had superhero syndrome, and I really did not let go easily. It took me 5 years. It was not like flipping a switch. My clients have no problem with it. Like, I had a really hard time with it. It was like giving the baby to the babysitter and trusting the babysitter that nothing's going to hurt my baby. Don't do what I did. Like, it should not take that long. I think if you do this methodically, realistically, this thing takes about 12 months to build.
Interesting. What are some of like the first steps that you advise people to do to like figure out how to outsource it? Is it, like, hey, here's everything, like lay out everything that needs to be done and just start grouping stuff together? Is it, coming up with roles? How do you advise people to figure out what, is outsourced and how to systematize and all that stuff?
Well, first we map out the entire business, from county research to getting the list, to pricing the list, to sending out your offers, and then tracking that response rate. Once it comes back, dealing, with the sellers, closing with the seller, recording the deed, then starting your market. Or actually, I skipped the whole thing. Due diligence. Your due diligence. So we map out every aspect of the business, and then one by one, there's really quick wins in there. What can these inexpensive VAs do on Fiverr? Well, that's scrub the list. Where can we find somebody to do intake? Well, that's US based. So maybe that's somebody that, wants to get a paid internship at your university, and you get that person. Because we've already built the software right away, you've got a huge advantage there, is just, investing in the software that we already built. So, and then as far as the marketing, well, then you start looking for ad writers, and you start looking for people to post on Craigslist and Facebook, send out the neighbor letters is automated, but you kind of create all this as you go, but you want to delegate, you don't want to abdicate. So I always recommend that you personally go through it yourself, and as you're working in real time, create videos of yourself, like on Zoom you can do it, or Loom, and then take that video, get it transcribed, and then start creating a step-by-step process of it, and then go to your child or go to a neighbor who's a child and ask them, do you understand this? And test it. And then, see what they don't understand, and like, oh yeah. And then you start refining it that way.
So I think that's important, because I think today's generation, you probably get this call all the time. probably some young 20-year-old or 30-year-old or even 40-year-olds like, wait a second, I want someone to do everything for me. What you just said is you got to go through the steps, because if you've never gone through the step and then you just want, you hire someone to do it or you find someone to do it, if they don't do it right, you don't know if they're doing it right or wrong. So if you've never done it and you just go get someone to do it, you're going to be, it may work, but if there's an inefficiency, you're never going to find it because you've never gone through the process. And I think that's something that most people overlook, that step. And there are a million different types of mentors and coaching programs and all that stuff out there. But I think people, it's a low hanging fruit to say, do this. And if it doesn't work, people want to blame the individual when they can't look in the mirror and say, wait a second, I don't even know what I'm doing. How am I supposed to teach them how to do it?
Yeah. I mean, you literally could not have said that any better. And we use the 1-30 ratio. So let's say that there's a task that takes 5 minutes. Well, you as the CEO of your company, you need to invest at least 150 minutes on training that task. If you think it's going to take less, then you're shortcutting it. And then you can see, okay. And I always like to hire 3 and keep 1 and see who's got some emotional labor to them and does more than what I asked as well. And that way I'm getting A players instead of someone who's just playing for pay.
Yep. I think that's important because people discount them going through the steps. And I think you can't tell someone to do if you haven't done it.
Yeah. I think you won't know too, if in, 3 months or 3 years, if they're continuing to do a good enough job, if you don't even know how it's supposed to be done in the first place. So that's awesome. I think that's a great place to wrap it up. Thank you so much for coming on. Can you tell people where to get a hold of you, where to find out more about you, books, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think a great place to start is the landgeek.com /REIE, Real Estate Investment Experience, REIE. And we have a $97 passive income launch kit course that I'd like to offer your listeners for free. And it kind of walks into more detail about what we discussed, and that way they know if this resonates with them or not. So that's a great place to start as well. And then, of course, Dirt Rich is on Amazon or thelandgeek.com, or check out the podcast, the Art of Passive Income podcast. And I'd love to have you guys on as a guest as well.
No, we would love it. It was awesome talking to you because it's something that was, people don't talk about it. So I think it's good that out there, everyone go check out, all the websites he mentioned, read the book. I think it's a discounted thing that people don't like to do, but pick it up, read it, reach out to Mark, check out his podcast. I think that's it.
Yeah. Perfect. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Thank you.